I think it is. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Quest Show. I am Lana Quest. I am here. It is a different day. Normally, we're on Thursdays at 8 p.m. Don't forget that time. But we do have a special show today. So we are here on a Wednesday and we are here a little early. But before I get into what the show is going to be about, I just wanted to take a minute to ask you all to please like, share, and subscribe to the show. I want to thank any new subscribers that I may have out there. How is everyone feeling, right? You're a little stressed? I'm a little stressed. We have 2 weeks to go. Have you guys voted? Have you voted? If you haven't voted, what are you waiting for? No one has any excuse not to be voting, especially here in Massachusetts. As a matter of fact, in other states too, you can vote by mail. So you can't even say, I don't want to go out and stand in lines when you could have voted by mail. But if you haven't voted by mail yet, and if it's too late in your state, I don't know what your rules are, get yourself to the polls and vote. All right? Yeah, do that for us. But anyway, back to the show because, I was telling my special guest that I veer off a lot, which I do, but I am going to focus. I have notes here, everyone. Look at this. Notes. So the show today is going to be about, hey, Mexican girl, how are you? The show is going to be about the impacts of these abortion restrictions, specifically the abortion bans with no exceptions for rape and incest, and what the impacts really are. And oftentimes, if you haven't lived through it or you don't know anyone who's gone through it, I can talk about it until I am blue in the face because I'm a woman and I know what it feels like to go through different emotions. I also know what it feels like to be a survivor of rape. But when you connect the two together, being forced to have, deliver a child, that's the byproduct of an assault. That's a whole nother realm. So we do have a special guest here. Her name is Emma. Emma is going to be anonymous, so she is not going to show her face, but she is going to tell her story about what I just talked about. And I don't want to give any of it away. So I'm really going to stop talking right now and I'm going to introduce Emma and let her, well, I'm not going to introduce her. She's going to introduce herself, actually. So, Emma, you can come on out, unmute yourself, let everyone know who you are, why you decided to come out and tell your story.
Hi, Lana. It's nice to be with you today. It's actually honestly a little bit horrifying that it's
Mhm.
necessary, but I appreciate you being available and making yourself available because once I decided I just can't sit and watch this happen to other people. It's actually been really hard to find someone safe to talk to where I can maintain my safety because I did have the child and his safety is my utmost priority.
Right.
Um, it's challenging to speak up after all these years of hiding, and I've spent like my entire adult life hiding and having to be silent. Um, I want to just kindly say to people that if you've been the victim of sexual assault, this conversation can be triggering.
Yeah.
I want to share that I believe in the right to body autonomy for everyone. I think that's an innate human right under all circumstances. Pregnancy is a dangerous medical condition, and it has permanent physical life-changing effects. People die. I think these bans violate that innate human right, and certainly the privacy of women and the little girls.
Yeah.
For the states to take control over their bodies and dictate that they must risk their life. When the state of Florida started putting forward these abortion bans, I was reading the proposed, legislation, and I was stunned. And I was like, this can't be true. This can't be true. And so I looked up my local rep and I called them and I said, are they serious about having no exceptions for rape, for incest? And at the time, this was a 15-week ban. And he said, actually, yeah, I'm sorry, they are serious. And this is a committee bill. And I do think this has legs. I do think they're going to be able to pass this. And so I asked him to put me in touch with whoever was spearheading the efforts to work with this, because it's just so brutal. I couldn't imagine that the legislature would do this, but if they were going to, that they wouldn't give exceptions for rape and incest. And what I learned is that they absolutely didn't care. They limited public speaking to 30 seconds in most of the committee's hearings, down from 3 minutes. So that experience caused me such tremendous distress and was just traumatizing. And I had to go back to counseling. Like it caused such a huge impact to me to once again be disregarded.
Right.
And to see what other people were going through. It snapped me back to what I had been through, and knowing what other people were going to go through, and new reality for me to think about how much worse is this for a victim of incest.
Right.
I just, it pains me to think of that. So I just have felt compelled to share my journey and my experiences. And what I'm going to share with you today is what I experienced in going through a pregnancy from rape, and the challenges that those circumstances have carried out throughout my entire life. And later in life, I experienced a very tragic pregnancy where it became medically necessary for me to have an abortion. And that really broke my heart. So I want
Right.
people to just listen and try to understand of, if I didn't have an abortion from when I was raped, what was so bad, and it had to have been seriously bad, that I would then need to have an abortion to save my life, that I would not be able to get now if I
Right.
was going through those circumstances now. So I'm
Right.
afraid for other people, and that's why I'm coming to speak with you.
Yeah. So let's go back to I'm sorry to like I feel like I'm re-traumatizing you, and I
Oh,
really
please no. I
I
honestly,
know
before
it's
the
just
legislature did that,
I
and
know it's
yeah, if
just
I
it's
wasn't prepared to answer a question, I'll say I'm not comfortable with that.
funny. So let's just go back to the rape. Can you just share your emotions when you found out that you were pregnant?
I was in shock. Um, I was asleep, and I woke up to horrible pain and to a very brutal rape, and I was knocked unconscious. Um, it was weeks before I could even walk without pain again. And then the fact that I could possibly be pregnant just honestly never crossed my mind, because
Right.
I was just shell shocked and trying to function. And I didn't really move much for several days, until I needed to go to work.
Right.
I didn't get up, and then my brain kicked into survival mode of whatever form. Like, you don't get to choose your response to trauma.
Right.
And I
Right.
was just in shock. So I was terrified. I was still trying to leave the domestic violence, coercive control circumstance that I was in. And every time I would try to leave, I'd be physically stopped and physically injured and
Right.
punished. And I was then terrified for, just the reality of, I'm going to die and the baby will die. And some sort of survival instinct kicked in of, I need to figure out a way to get out of this situation and just try to save my own, our lives. I need to
Right.
just live.
Right. So what made you just decide to keep the pregnancy?
Again, I think a large part of it was um, a survival instinct that
Mhm.
kicked in.
Mhm.
Um, I became very protective of both of us. The way
Right.
I was raised were that babies, children were um, a joy, they were a gift. I grew up, taking care of children in the church and
Right.
where I lived, and was just very accustomed to being around babies and children. It was not foreign to me.
Right.
Um, so at that point, I think between my upbringing and whatever trauma, survival instinct that kicked in, it just kicked in for both of us. Um, and that's honestly what I think the case is.
Right. Wow, that's tough. Oh my gosh. So, oh, let's skip to, well, do you mind skipping or do you want to add?
Yeah, go
'Cause
ahead.
trying
No, no,
trying to
let's
read
go
the
ahead.
cues. Right, right, right. Because so for everyone out there, this is Emma, and she is sharing her experience of having a child after a rape. Emma and I had spoken previously, so I know a little more to this story. So I want to talk about how you were, because what Republicans don't think about, when we talk about the impacts of actually, giving birth to the person who assaulted you, it's their child too. You talked about having to separate the assaulter from, you and your child, like totally
Yeah,
blank him out
absolutely.
of the picture.
I've had to just mentally sit down and make some rules for myself, some principles, some lines that I just can't allow to be crossed. One of them is that I would not acknowledge him. I would not, he, for me in my brain, just couldn't exist. And I decided this is just my baby. My brain's way of dealing with this is he's just mine. A way of sort of claiming him as he's a part of me. After losing so much of myself and having so much of my autonomy taken from me, I didn't want to lose anything else, nothing else. I didn't want to do that. And that was a part of me. I could see, my brain was able to separate the baby from the conception from rape. And as horrified and terrified as I was, having nightmares, shaking every time I went to the doctors, having to deal with ongoing safety issues. I was hurt several times when I was pregnant. It's I'm thankful that my brain was able to do it because it allowed me to survive. But that concept of too much in denial came back to haunt me later on when my son was a teenager and not so politely brought it up. And, you know, having to deal with the realities that
Right.
I couldn't maintain that when the Florida legislature was going through this, because those walls that my brain built up for me to survive this really
Right.
crumbled.
Right. 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 Do you think if you had more help or if there was outreach, because the medical facility or the hospital knew that you were a victim of rape, right? Like they
When I went in to the doctor for my first appointment, um, I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know what to do. And then they did the initial exam. She said, "When did you have your baby?" And I said, "I'm just pregnant now." She's like, "Well, no, it looks like this with this next baby, you should have an episiotomy because, you ripped very badly when you had your baby." And I said, "I haven't had a baby." And she paused and she looked at me and I looked at her and I was still in shock
right,
and not connecting. I was
right,
ripped that badly from being raped, and she didn't call the police. She didn't report it. She didn't ask me if I was in a safe situation or a safe place. All of these things that I have now learned later on through counseling, being a 18-year-old at the time who had lived a very sheltered life. There's no social media, there's no looking things up at this time, there was no support. I was just stunned, and the people that were around me um, were not helpful or supportive. I think maybe she was, I don't know what, maybe she was frightened, maybe she was startled, but she had a responsibility, and they
right.
did not accept that responsibility.
Well, the police neither, right?
No, they did not. Because once I did, I had already filed assault and battery charges before I found out that I was pregnant. And I was already in trouble for doing that. I was already receiving threats. I was already, um, having to be careful where I went or what I did, just basically school, job, home, classes. I was in college at the time, so taking classes. Um, and when someone has already hurt you, when they tell you that they are going to continue doing it and you won't know where and you won't know when and they'll make sure you can't prove it, you do fucking believe them. And it
Right,
scared me to death, and then some. And when the police did accept the initial charges of assault and battery, and when I went to court the first time for the ex parte hearing, um, he admitted to one of the acts because he didn't think it was a problem. And the other two, he called me a liar. And the judge looked at me and said, "That's assault." And he's like, "No, it's not." And the judge is like, "Yeah,
wow,
that's assault." Because he so doesn't think that any of his behavior is wrong
right,
in his,
right,
sociopathic head. Nothing that he does is wrong. Um, so when I was the going to court made me so ill and it was so scary. I asked them to please push back the trial till after I have the baby. And the attorney that was assigned to the case said no. She said, "I've got the evidence from the ex parte hearing. He's already admitted to one of the charges. You've got your protective order, and this is ready to go." And I'm like, "But I'm sick." And he's sneering at my belly in court. He's threatened to punch me in the stomach or push me down the stairs. He had already strangled me once when I was running from him, trying to leave, running from him on the stairs. And, you know, it wasn't about what I needed or my health or my safety or the baby. It was about her schedule. So I
Right.
went to my doctor and I said, I'm getting sick and it's so scary going through this. Can you please write a letter and ask them to delay the trial? And then I had to go into court for that and be sneered at again. And it made her mad. It made her mad. And they rescheduled the trial for when I was 8 months pregnant. And I went in there huge. And there's not, you know, there wasn't any separation of where you wait and stand. There's
Right.
not any, there's a guard standing in the hallway, but you're coming and you're going, and then there's a room. And before the trial, she said, look, I don't know you and I don't know him, and this is just what I want to do. And she put it on a step docket, which meant she reserved the right to bring the charges back after a period of time if he did anything else, but she was not bringing the charges forward. And she let him go. And at that point, you know, I had called the police. I had told them about other things that had happened, additional things that had happened. And every time you do, you're afraid of how much more trouble you're going to get in for it. How much more are you going to be punished
Right.
for for speaking up?
Right.
And you have to gauge the risk that you're in with, can you take the risk of telling people what happened?
Right.
They decided to not follow through with any further charges, essentially because they were mad at me because I asked for a continuance about being pregnant.
This is insane. So, like, just pause for a minute. Now, you wanted to continue with your pregnancy. So now let's just imagine all the women who just don't want this. Like, it's literally being forced upon them to deal with situations like this. Not just women, children. How do
Yeah,
children navigate this craziness? Like, how do they don't even understand. A seventh grader is not even going to understand the rape, doesn't even understand the pregnancy and what's happening to her poor little body, let alone we need to be doing court hearings because he raped her. Like, what? And she's got to talk to detectives and this person and that person. This is like, it's literally insane, and no one cares. Like, we're treating it like it's just a scraped knee. Like, it's just not a big deal.
right.
Like, what's the big deal? You're just out the baby, you just keep moving. Like,
The the
no.
the callousness that people have treated this with has stunned me, especially for the little girls. And
Yeah.
when I reached out to the Florida legislature saying, no, no, certainly when I tell them about this isn't just rape, you are raped, then you are having to tell someone, which is what really, really first traumatized me. When I then had to tell people what happened when he filed for custody, it broke me because then people knew, and it just
Right.
spread that feeling of shame and violation because it wasn't on my terms that I shared like I'm sharing with you now. This is on sharing with you is on my terms at the time. And what I urge people to think about the realities of is that forcing someone to go through a trauma is so inhumane. And honestly, I think it's child abuse. If someone had sat down with me and said, look, clearly something very violent has happened to you, we can see it on your body. Are you in a safe place? Yes or no? Let's move on from there. Let's get you a counselor for some support, a victim advocate, and let's talk through what are the options. Then I could have made a more informed choice because this has affected, I've been
Right.
hiding my entire adult life,
Yeah.
and it does something to you. And as my child got older and different things were revealed here and there, because the internet is a god awful evil thing and you can't hide everything anymore. I didn't plan on him finding out. That wasn't a plan. That
Right.
wasn't a sit down conversation that I
Right.
planned. You know, one of his nosy friends, you know, brought it up, and he asked me one day, "Hey, my friend said you must have been raped," and I dropped the dish that I was washing, and it was over. His self-esteem
Yeah.
completely shattered, his image of self. And then him finding out, oh, wait a minute, we have a protective order, we're in the address confidentiality program, but wait a minute, mommy, does your protective order cover me?
Right.
No.
So now there's two victims, right?
Yes, there are.
You are a victim, and now it's your child that's a victim.
It is. And I'd like to say I did not understand that, because the way my mind separated him out as his own person, his own little person, that when he was upset about this further, and I said, listen, yes, I was hurt. We are safe now. We are fine. We take the precautions that we need to. I moved, us across the country. We are now in a different, new, very safe, happy life situation. And it doesn't matter. And he did not agree with me. He
Right.
felt like he was from something bad, and
Right.
that made him bad. And there's no love language for that. There was no way of reaching him through that fog of self disdain of, eventually when he was a teenager. And he said to me, I came from the worst day of your life. And I said, no, you didn't. And he's like, well, that's not possible. It had to be the worst day of your life. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
it wasn't, because I had lost the other baby. I had to terminate a pregnancy from my husband that I loved, and a baby that I wanted, because I didn't know I had an autoimmune disease and my body was allergic to the pregnancy hormones, and I nearly died. I lost 18 pounds in 10 weeks. I was on bed rest from week 3. It's unheard of. It's ridiculous. And now I wouldn't be able to get a sign off with
Right.
the new 6-week abortion ban.
Right. Right.
So, but having your child come to you and say, I'm from the worst day of your life, and me not understanding, I'm like, that, you know, you weren't there. You didn't do this.
Right.
In
Right.
my mind, you helped save my life by me needing to protect us. And for the women who have very different circumstances and feel like, when a lot of women feel when they're pregnant, even under good circumstances, that this is a foreign takeover of their body.
Right.
Because it is. On a high level, it is. Your organs are being rearranged.
Right.
My gosh, the ribs on a 10-year-old, on a 12-year-old, I can't
Right.
imagine the pain.
I can't imagine the pain either. And there was this lawmaker, I forget, I want to say it was Tennessee, but I'm not sure. She was, praising God for giving young girls like childbearing hips when she was
That's disgusting.
it 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 is. It
That's
really is.
disgusting. That's
Eh,
disgusting.
um, but the impact of this, like even with, I think we talked about this before we came on the air, because these impacts, even if Kamala becomes our president, the damage is already in the system. It's baked in. And I know you have the stats on that about
Yeah.
how many pregnancies came out of rape, but just think about that and think about already in the pipeline that you have these young children and you have these women that are going to go through the same thing that you went through, that these children in 5, 10, 15 years are going to know the truth. They're going to deal with the things that your son dealt with, feeling like he caused the issues, wondering if he's going to be like his father. Is he going to be an assaulter? That's going to impact the kids, the parents, and that without proper counseling, we're going to have some serious issues. We're talking about suicide rates are going to go up. Like it's just
They will, because the friend groups, especially in middle school years, those are brutal.
yeah,
They are not somebody that is kind. They're not kind to one another about this stuff. It is
right.
more of a rub it in your face
Yeah.
time of life, unfortunately. It definitely was for him. And as he got older and he shared with some friends, they were like, oh, wow, here I was thinking you were going to tell me you were abused. Like he was walking around with this big secret, this huge hurt, and this pain. And when he would share with somebody once he was in high school and in college, then they were like, oh, wow, well, that's awful. But, you know, you're here and you're okay.
You want to
But,
play
but,
basketball?
but
Like they deal with
right,
it differently.
right,
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
can't, they don't have a reference point for how do you be a good friend in that,
Right.
and that is not their fault.
Right.
And it hurts, and it hurt him to have to come ask me, who do, who do I look like, mommy?
Yeah.
And it just breaks your heart. And I didn't know I'd be asked that because I just shut down.
Right.
And I wasn't prepared to ever talk about these kinds of things with him. And once we did try to get some counseling for it, it was awful. The counselors, there is not a researched program
Right.
of care for the children of rape. They looked at him like an exhibit at a zoo.
Right.
And one of them was particularly bad, and you don't know what you're saying to the kid because they have to maintain that privacy to have that
Right.
bond with the kid. But about the
Right.
time he got into the car and curled up on the ball on the floor, I'm like, all right, not going to this doctor again.
Right.
And there are one of them would be like, wow, what is that like? I've never met anybody like you. Like he was a psychological curiosity.
Oh my.
And it was awful. It was more harm than good until you find the right trauma informed doctor, and until
Right.
they conduct more research on how to care for these children, which none of the states who have put in these bans have put any research in place for
No.
any of these things.
Nope.
Florida outright reduced their amount of money putting into Medicaid after forcing women to have more children with severe birth defects.
Yeah. That have you seen the stats on that too? That is insane. Babies are dying, and babies are dying. They're dying horrible, painful deaths because they already had fatal fetal anomalies that was
Yes,
determined when they were in the uterus, when there could have been an abortion. But in those states that are forcing women to have these babies, all but to watch them struggle to
die.
breathe in agony and then die. And now you have stress on the family, post traumatic stress disorder. Now you have a funeral that you have to pay for. Now you have medical bills that you have to pay for, all because Republicans are like, oh, fuck your lives. We don't care. We want what we want. Like there's
Well,
no rhyme or reason for them to
they,
want what they want. Like there's just no fucking rhyme or reason to it. We
it's
keep
like you
saying,
you can't break through when someone has this sanctimonious bubble around them of idealism. And when when has life for all of us ever been super ideal?
right,
Even when things are going well, um you know that's a lot of hard work, and things aren't perfect, and you're grateful for the good turns and the things that come to pass for you that are good. But
right,
when has anybody's life ever met that idealism? That is just not reality. And refusing to listen to it is
right.
when I really, really lost it. Florida cut off public speaking from 3 minutes to 30 seconds. There are plenty of times they didn't allow any public speakers at all. On one of the House floor votes, one of the senators said, you know what, we got to get a move on here. I don't want to stand here all night and listen to people cry.
Oh my
And that
God.
was just so, so, oh my God, that was awful. Rep Grawl was in one of the committee hearings. This was her sponsored bill for the 15 and 6-week abortion ban. 6 weeks, I believe, at that point she was a senator. But when she was a rep, a woman had come forward with public speaking and said, everyone knows and loves someone who's had an abortion. And it really upset her, because then she came back in her response outing her family member as having an abortion. And when she found out about it, she was so angry, she decided she would never, ever let that happen again. And that was her driving factor for doing this in Florida. And I'm sitting here like, did I just hear this right? We're in a live committee hearing. Did she have permission to out this family member? That is that person's privacy.
HIPAA
And she
violation,
shamed
everything.
that
Yeah.
family member
Yeah.
as if it's not your body. You're not living this life. And when you have been raped, and God help everybody that has had this happen from incest and human trafficking, that is that much worse.
That is too. Human
You're raped.
trafficking.
You're
What
you're
the?
raped. Now
Oh
there's
my God.
custody. Now there's hiding for the rest of your life. Now there's moving. There's it's endless. There's not a point in life where this doesn't touch this.
Right. Right. And then you have the flip side of not allowing women to have an abortion because you may have an abusive man partner who doesn't want you to be pregnant, who does threaten, like, your assaulter to kick you in the stomach or do all of these bad things or hurt you, right? Because they don't want it. Like, there's so many tentacles to what's going to happen, and it all leads back to cruelty to women. Like
It
that,
does.
it
Because
just
taking away someone's choice, it's not at this point even just about their body, although that is it's extremely critical. That's your health for the
right,
rest of your life.
right,
My health was never the same. I developed gestational diabetes, and that is something that now stayed with me since that point. And for some people that doesn't end up being a long-term big deal. Other people it does.
right,
So, you know, but if you don't have that choice of how you're going to run your whole life, you don't have that safety, you don't have that health, you don't have the well-being. Florida and many other states do not count mental health as a concern, for one of the few exceptions when they do have exceptions. And you know there are women who are on medications, whether it's for schizophrenia, personality disorders, levels of depression, that
yeah,
that will cause birth defects, and they don't qualify for an abortion because that's for psychological health of the mother. Now, now do
oh
you
my
have
God,
to go off
oh,
this
yeah,
medication and
yep,
potentially lose your stability of your
yes,
job, your place that you live?
yeah.
It's
Cancer patients,
cancer
you
patients.
can't
Yes.
have your chemo because it'll kill the unborn.
Yeah.
What?
I resent how the legislature and this movement is changing medical definitions and terminology
Right, right,
to religiously based dogma terminology in the concept of conception. Before they were very targeted with how they did the 6-week ban, because they knew that most abortions statistically happen between 8 and 12 weeks.
right.
And when the states that did the 15-week ban, that's a fucking arbitrary
No,
date.
it's
That
okay.
is not, 20 weeks is when you can start to have the test for developmental
Right,
abnormality. The
correct.
fetus hasn't even developed enough to test, because there's nothing there yet to test
Right.
for those abnormalities. They're so
Absolutely.
targeted with it that, a woman, it's a week and a half or so for embryo to be implanted in a uterus. You're not even pregnant yet, and they're counting you as
Yeah.
pregnant in
Yeah.
order to have the 6-week ban.
Right.
So they've moved that definition back 2 weeks, not, and then they've moved this to 6 weeks. So now you've lost a lot of time, and women don't know they're pregnant. Your hormones, most of them haven't even really started amping up yet.
Right. Or women like me who didn't have periods. I didn't have periods.
Yes.
So I never knew, right? I had to get on fertility pills. My first two, the last two, it was like a mystery until like the fourth month. I'm like, maybe I should take a test. Oh, I don't know. I don't feel good.
A
Right.
lot
But I
of, yeah.
just didn't know. Yeah.
No, and that should be okay. That should
Right.
not become the new standard of fear.
Right.
And, we're supposed to be the United States. And if you don't have equal access to reproductive health care, what do women do when they need to travel? And if they're looking to have a pregnancy and they're a high risk pregnancy, if they
Right.
travel to a state that has these bans, they might not make it home.
You're
They could bleed
absolutely
out in
right.
another state.
You're
That's
absolutely right.
terrifying.
And these abortion bans are also redefining the standard of care for doctors. So
Yes.
we're not even getting the standard of care when you have women in Idaho being med flighted out of the hospital because they're waiting so long. They're like, let's see, is it a medical emergency? Are they near death? Not yet. And then they wait until the very last moment. And then they're like, oh shit, she's dying or she's coding. Let's med flight her out because now she's too sick for us to take care of. Like this is happening right now. So the standard of care for women has totally changed. Just like they don't do that. If someone comes into the hospital with chest pains, no one sends them away to say, come back when your chest pains are closer together or they get worse. No, let's
Right. Yeah,
bring you
that's
in.
yeah, they don't do that, do they? They have
They hook you up to an
double standard.
EKG. Exactly. EKG immediately. And if they see something, man, you may be under the knife having a freaking triple bypass, like right away. Like they're not sending you back home for that. So why
Of
is
a
a
lot of the
woman?
people, yeah, of a lot
Go
of the
ahead.
people that have inspired me to try to further come forward is Hadley Duvall and Ryan
Mm-hmm,
Hamilton.
mm-hmm.
When
Oh yeah.
I first read about the Hamiltons' circumstances, my
Mm-hmm,
heart just broke for them
mm-hmm.
because I was at a death's door situation that, even if you are put into hospice care, no one can tell you exactly when you're going to die. It is not life, the body and life doesn't work like that.
Right.
And my heart just went out to them. And I thought, in listening to him, oh my God, the only time I've ever seen my husband afraid, was in this circumstance. And really, I would love everyone to think about if one of you were just suddenly not present, how quickly would your family fold?
Right.
How quickly? Because we didn't have family and friends around that could come take care of the kids every day. I had
Right.
a 1.5-year-old and a third grader. And it was 3 weeks that we managed. I was on bed rest from week 3 to I was 10 weeks. The doctor had said sometimes the body can adapt and adjust. I lost 18 pounds. That's almost 2 pounds a week. I was in such pain. I was in constant pain. I couldn't sit up. I couldn't walk. My husband carried me into the doctors. He carried me into the specialist. They didn't even give me fluids. I mean, the negligence of this. was in the early 2000s. The negligence here of just not even sending me for fluids when I was that frail is baffling. My eldest thought I was going to die and was horrified and depressed. My 1-year-old just started screeching and screaming and was immediately put into preschool, which we couldn't afford. It was 3 weeks before my husband's job was threatened because of him needing to take extra time to get them off to school and come back and pick up the little one. We were able to get a ride home, thankfully, for my eldest from school. People can't do this. They
No.
can't do this. And what am I going to do? Die and orphan my children?
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people out there right now that say, yes, do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, don't you care if I die and orphan
No.
children?
We heard Donald Trump talk
And we
about
know
ratings. We heard him talk about ratings when they said he was on whatever that woman's name is, her show, and they're like, "Oh, Amber Thurman's family is giving like a rebuttal to whatever, whatever." And he's like, "Well, I hope we get better ratings." I'm just like, again, it's just the sickness, and like you said, like that's another level of it, right? Children being left without their mom because the moms are dying. Candy Miller died
yes,
because
she
she
did.
couldn't get it medical care with her child in the bed with her. That's where she
Oh,
died.
yes.
There was
Heartbreaking.
another Florida woman, I forgot her name, where she was her water broke. They kept
Yeah,
sending her home and sending her home, and
that
she
was
didn't.
in, I believe, Coral Springs.
Yes, right. She was the one that um miscarried, I think,
Miscarried.
in the salon, right? I think she was at the
Yes,
hair salon.
that was brutal. And they
Yeah.
are out sharing their experience
Yes.
as
Yes.
well. And my heart just goes out to them and everyone. There have been over 100 reported instances of neglect
Oh,
and
gosh.
women being turned away from the hospitals. Over 100. And these are people who have the right to their life,
Right.
who probably a lot of them want to have more children. She was
Right.
able to live and have another child after that traumatic experience. But you're playing, they're playing roulette with everyone else's life. And the doctor that I had was angry at me when we went to him and said, we can't do this. I couldn't sit up, I couldn't walk, and I hadn't been able to do either of those things for weeks. And after losing way more percentage of my body weight than is medically safe, and them having zero plan for what to possibly do for me, my husband came to me and it's like the same day we were just looking at each other and we just cried because we both wanted the baby. We
Right.
wanted the baby. And uh, my God, I got through having a baby from being raped, but my
Right.
body just couldn't, it just fell apart because I have an autoimmune disease and didn't know it. And my body couldn't support the pregnancy. And he's like, even if you could last long enough for the baby to get to viability, which is, at about roughly 24 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Could you survive giving birth?
Right.
I'm a person that has low blood pressure
Right.
already. You
Right.
know, even if they did a C-section, I could die. There's no way I was making it to a 40-week
Right.
pregnancy. And I wanted to live. I wanted to raise my kids. And I don't think people should be demonized for that. I don't think
Right.
they should be punished for that. You know, we I've had several miscarriages and it is heartbreaking. And when I've read about different individuals' experiences. You know, the people here in Florida that miscarried in the salon, you have to go clean that up yourself. And
Yeah.
shame on the hospital system for putting them on that. You know, the
Right.
Hamiltons, he not only had to carry his wife in and out
Yeah.
of the hospitals, he had to go home and clean up that blood. And
Yeah.
that's traumatizing to people. They are
Yeah.
traumatizing people in the name of, you know, it's all about the baby, but it's got to be all about all of us.
Right.
I love children. I
Right,
love
but
them.
what and all in the name of what baby, right? There's no baby, and they fucking know
Yes,
that there's no baby because
yes,
there's literally a case in fucking
miscarriage.
Texas that the Texas that yeah that corrections officer who was pregnant and who begged them to let her leave work because she didn't feel good, and by the time they let her leave, she went to the hospital, she delivered a stillborn. She's suing the state of Texas. You know what the state of Texas is saying? That wasn't a baby. Like
Saying
this
that.
wasn't a baby. What are you
Yeah,
talking about? Why are you suing us? That wasn't a baby. So it's
right.
a baby when it's convenient for them.
Yes, yes.
So
I
I
think,
know you have more of your story because I just want to like not. I'm not gonna talk anymore. I'm gonna let you because I know you had all of those notes, and we're at
yeah,
8:20. So I want you to like try to get in as much more as you want us to know, and learn about before we wrap it up because I don't want to keep you too much longer.
yeah. Thank you. I would love anybody, you know, listening to your show. I'm sure has a, you know, a heart like you do and an open mind to listen and to care about the experiences that people are having. And you know, there's never been a chance, you know, for me to live without fear. And my son has done the, the best he can rebuilding and making some boundaries for himself and has come to some peace with it. But I want people to know and understand that when you meet someone and they're like, oh, you look too young to be a mother, do you really need to say that? I mean, and to be fair, if you meet someone who's had a baby in their 50s, do you need to say, oh, you must have been old when you had your baby? I mean, come on. Just either which
That
way,
may happen, Emma. That may
I,
happen because there may
I
be
tell you, you know, it does, you know, I'm telling
a
you. So
55-year-old may not be able to get an abortion if she's in a red
they,
state.
they can't, no, and not for developmental issues either. So,
Right.
you know, it's, you know, check your inside thoughts a little and just try to be reserve those, you know. And it happens with doctors too. You know, I go to the doctors and they're like, wow, you were young when you had a baby. Well, I was raped,
Yeah.
you know. And
Yeah.
now I have that in my day again, and it's not necessary. So please, people, you know, just let the pause stand. um
Yeah.
you know, there is not research for raising children conceived through rape. And we need support. There is not what to expect when you're expecting from rape. And it's scary. It is fucking scary. And you're going through a lot of different things. I didn't go to maternity, I didn't go to classes. I didn't go to birthing classes. And my doctor's office didn't encourage me to or give me a list or say, here, sign up, or hey, we see you haven't signed up either. Because
Right.
now I'm the ugly, quiet thing in the room that they don't want to see. When Hadley Duvall stood on stage and said, we see you, I was
Yeah.
like, well,
Yeah.
that's new. And wow, what does that feel like? Um, I hope so. I hope they
Yeah.
see us take those circumstances a step further if she hadn't miscarried and had to have the baby, because there are young women, young girls, you know, was it a 10-year-old in Mississippi a
Yeah.
little while back? When I read the article, they didn't say anything about finding them counseling or finding them family support. This baby
Right.
is going to have identity issues for the rest of their lives, because you've got a child mommy, a
Right.
grandma that's a mommy, and now
Right.
it's who am I?
Right.
And that is too much to navigate on your own. I
Yeah,
promise you it is.
it
It
is.
was
'Cause it just
absolutely too much for us.
Yeah, because you just reminded me like of all of the, and I think we talked about this when we spoke last week, the things that you have to fill out that kids, because I remember filling things out and he was like, well, your mommy's name, your daddy's name. And then the kids are like, who's your daddy? Like, why aren't you
That's
writing
right.
his name down?
And
Where's that?
there's a good point for at the hospital, because
Right,
at the hospital, and even, you're going to doctor's appointments, who's the daddy? Not talking about it. Didn't want to say the words "I've been raped" out loud, and couldn't handle that yet. And that should have been up to me.
right.
And when you go to try to buy a baby book for your baby and all it says is father,
Yeah,
when you are going to all of these different life moments and it says father, eventually my son chose to do a 23andMe test to try to get some further medical information. They were asking me for medical history from my rapist. I was raped. I don't have the medical background for the
right,
father. I had a
right.
spina bifida screening test come back as high risk for spina bifida. That was fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
So now I'm 18, possibly having a baby with spina bifida. And then they just said, well, if you don't have the medical history of the father, okay. And we'll just see what happens when the baby's born. And by grace, he was okay. But that was terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
I, you know, so many things. You know, it's, please, I hope for people to talk to each other and care and say, I now know someone. I have now heard someone speak about this. This is real. Like, no one wants us to be real. It's like, you can go
Right.
ahead and be imaginary there in the corner because you're the 0.05%.
Right.
Florida stats has the number of abortions and incest. They talked a lot about, oh, it's only 0.5%, 0.5%. So we don't need exceptions for them. Don't we? Because
Oh,
if you're at that 0.05%, you're a person.
right.
On average, in Florida, reported are 10 instances of incest abortions from 2019. The year 2019, it was 10. The year 2020, there were 9 abortions for
Right.
incest. 2021, there were 8. And there are over 100 every year for rape, but not incest. They separate it by age. Florida is, some of the ads have just been gaslighting,
Mm-hmm.
Floridians, saying that there's going to be a free for all if you pass this. There's no guidance. And in the stats, there were 0 abortions in the 3rd trimester, and that's 24 weeks and over, past the point of potential viability in
Right.
2021. And in
Right.
2019, 0. That's quite a free for all there. 0. 2019, there were 2. One because of the life of the mother, and one because of a fatal fetal abnormality. 2.
Right.
So,
Free for all. Like
yeah, that's
that,
the free for all too.
and that's the big lie too, right? And like, yeah, I've been to an abortion clinic with a girlfriend when I was younger. And the thing about the clinics are, separate from the mammograms and the pap smears and all that they do. When you go in there and you tell them that that's what you want, they go, whoa, pump your brakes. Let me give you some information. Let me take some information. You go home and think about it, right? Like they counsel you. They don't take you right in and be like, yep, okay, open your legs. This is what we're going to do. That's not how that works
No.
anyway, right? Because they want people to think about options, choices,
Yeah.
adoption, surrogacy. There's so many choices that they give you, but guess what? It is the woman's choice. It is the family's choice. It is not fucking Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, Greg Abbott, or the rest of
JD.
those fools out there, JD Vance, who wants to be the next president. Ladies and the men that love the ladies, get up off your asses and get mad and do something about it, because this shit is real. This shit can happen to your wife, your daughter, your niece, your auntie. We just talked. It could happen to your grandmother, right? It can happen. She could be a 50-year-old, could get stuck with the baby. Imagine that shit.
And a custody battle.
And
And
at that age.
there are states that allow visitation and joint custody for rapists. And as insane as that sounds, I experienced a custody battle, and it was several years. My son was 3.5 years old before I took him to a park together ourselves, the two of us, just out of fear. And, the state laws they need to be for the clear and convincing evidence. And many of the states don't have the clear and convincing evidence laws. And even if they do, then you have a separate issue to then revoke their parental rights. And if you are raped and you give a baby up for adoption, that rapist can go and challenge the adoption and take the baby. People ask me, why didn't you give him up for adoption? Hell no. He would be less safe that way. And I had a boy. I had a little boy. And there's something different with that, because there are people who get this, that's my son, and entitlement over you. And all they have to say is you're a liar. And if you have put their name on the birth certificate, that has a lot of legal ramifications. There isn't rapist on our birth certificates, and they haven't added rapist to the birth certificates. So, no one wants to see that on their happy little birth certificate, rapist. And, some states require people, if they apply for assistance from the state, it requires them to name the person and go after them for child support. It is just, please, out there, this is so much more involved than just being pregnant. This is a lifetime of challenges that no one is there to support. The state isn't there to support. The research isn't there yet to support. And there are lots of good individual people out there, few, that you try to find them. It is hard. But just give people the benefit of the doubt for letting them chart their own lives from this point, because they've had that taken from them. And this is too traumatic to do this. If I had known that myself and the baby would be this level of unsafe our entire lives, I really can't say what I would have done, but at least I could have looked for more help or resources or some way to keep us in better shape and safer. Because we went through a lot of difficult years. This was before there was an address confidentiality program. Now there is, but good luck permanently hiding within an internet. It's so much more complicated than anybody has time to think about. But please, there are 10 states that have ballot initiatives for abortion-related issues. So please vote.
Yes. Yes. Please vote. It's 8:35. Emma, thank you so much for reaching out to me. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for coming on tonight. Took a lot of guts. You did it.
I did it. I got to, be me for a moment and, share what I wanted to share. So thank you. And um, thanks for everything you do.
Yes. So in the chat, they're saying thank you. Thank you for sharing that information. And again, everyone, I hope that you heard Emma's story, like really not just with your ears, but heard it with your heart and your soul, and you can take pieces of this story back to those stubborn family members that just aren't so sure about who, if they're still out there, who they want to vote for, if they want to even vote, if it impacts them, take what you've learned today, because what we hear on the surface and even what I've talked about on the show wasn't as in depth as Emma was able to explain these things, because there were things that I didn't even think about. And why would I, right? Why would we, unless we've been impacted? So it's important for us to share these stories with our people so that they are more informed and they're informed voters. So thank you, Emma. Thank you,
Thank
everyone,
you.
for showing up. And yeah, I'll see everyone next week. Emma, I will see you on the platform. I'll send
All
you a
right.
DM
Have a
because,
good night.
you too, you too. Be safe out there.
Thank you. Bye bye.
You're welcome. Bye, Michelle. Bye, Brian. Bye, everyone in the chat.